Hello, I'm Matthew Myers, the developer of the Ember in Edmond, Oklahoma. It's a pocket neighborhood, which we're really excited to be bringing you today. I'm here with my friend and I really effectively a business partner, Don Powers from Union Studio in Providence, Rhode Island. And a lot of times people will say, well, Matt, why are you working with a firm? If you're in Oklahoma and they're in Rhode Island, why would you go so far to hire a firm? And my answer is always the same, which is if you want a great project, it always starts with a fantastic team. And in my experience on a project like this, you just can't hire anybody and engage any architecture firm. I think it really requires a specialized firm. In my experience, there's probably one out of every 20 or 30 firms that could do something like this, maybe even less. And so it's really that top 5% or that top 2% that can do something. And so we went out and we did a search and we ended up partnering with Union on this. And so, Don, your award-winning architecture firm up in the Northeast, which I can't wait to go visit you in the fall next year because I know the trees are going to be amazing. But tell us a little bit about Union, about your tagline, which I actually love, and really about the culture in the team because everything flows from the leadership and the team at Union.
Yeah, no, thank you, Matthew. I'm really excited to be talking about these issues because they're what get me up in the morning. But you asked about our tagline, which is places of value and the value of place. And really that is a kind of, I think, kind of a clever little inversion of the same words, which talks about what we're after and what I think we are bringing to the market and to the potential buyers, which is that for something to be really attractive and for people to want to be there, there has to be this sort of thing that designers call the sense of place. And what I've always said is that value, every kind of value, from financial value to the developer, to the value of the homeowner who's buying into it, to the community in which this neighborhood would be, they're all levels of value that good design and good placemaking increases. And so this idea of the value of place is that it helps everybody. Every boat rises with better design. So that's what we've been about. We've always been tried to focus on the full three dimensions of a place, not just the architecture, not just the two-dimensional land plan, but how does that all come together and can it create a sense of place that when you walk through the gate, you say to yourself, well, I'm home. I'm at a place. So obviously you asked about our hiring and the people that we bring on. And I would say that our biggest recruitment tool is really that mission, because young people don't go into architecture to get rich, or if they do, they're sadly misguided. But they go into it because they're usually idealists and they're sort of artists. And what they really need is a sense of mission. And that's why we keep getting these great people applying to us, is because they feel like we have a goal, which is to make these places that people want to be. People want to buy a home in, people want to walk through, people want to say it's in their town. And young architects and designers are drawn to that. And so when I hire, I always say that really the one thing I've really done well, better than anything else in this firm, is have a good nose for somebody who shares the mission and will really put their heart and soul into it. And that's the key to whether someone's good or not. Any particular skill they can learn, but having the character and the mission is really what I think when you work with us and you say the nice things you say, I think you're responding to that.
Yeah. Well, you definitely got an amazing team, Don. I've loved working with you, Jeremy, Christina, and of course Anthony as well. Just a fantastic team, very responsive, and you guys just get it. One of the things that we do here on the Ember that's probably different than some other developers is we really start from day one with what are the values and what are the aspirations and what are the emotions that we want somebody to experience, as you said, when they first experience it, whether they arrive on the website, social media, or really when they walk into the gate or on the sidewalk for the very first time. And so in this particular development at the Ember, we're really focused on a few things. One was just healthy community and friendships. Okay, how do we promote that? We also talk about cozy and well-appointed homes and spaces within that. And then finally, a place where people would feel warm, welcome, and connected. So, how do we build the neighborhood around that? Notice I didn't talk about 2 stories or 3 stories or this size yard or that size yard. For us, it's always about people first, and we always start with that. What are the emotions that people want to experience? And so, one of the things we always try to do is in these pocket neighborhoods, we talk about this idea of in order to have community and relationships, you first have to have privacy. Tell us a little bit about Dawn, because I know you've coached me on this over the years.
Yeah, I just think it's, when you do what we do and you're designing places for people to live and work and walk and play, you have to be a pretty good observer of what allows or encourages people to do those things. And so I spend, and everybody in this office spends a lot of time walking through the best neighborhoods in the country and the world to say, okay, this feels right. What it is, and then we go out and measure it. And one of the things, say, just give you one example, is that people are much more the railing on someone's porch, counterintuitively, is much more important to making a person want to talk to somebody on the sidewalk than if that railing were not there. People need their sense of security. There's a jargon that we use called defensible space. And once people feel like they've got their own place, they're much more willing to go to the edge of it and talk to their neighbors. So that's kind of an idea. You're asking, how do you physically implement that mission of making a place neighborly? Well, you provide everybody, every homeowner, what they need to satisfy their immediate private needs. And then that leaves them bandwidth to walk across the walk and say hello to their neighbor. And so we always say no design can create community, but a design can certainly encourage or hinder the way people act. And so what we're trying to do is just stack the odds in favor of people having a casual, they're walking in and they're getting, we place our mail pavilion in a place where everybody will have to come because that's a common function of their day. And there's at that mailbox now, we want to create a moment where maybe they'll sit in a park bench and go through their junk mail and might just happen to strike up a conversation with their next door neighbor who's also getting their mail. So the point of this is that there are all sorts of things you can do in a design to encourage the kind of mission that you talked about for the neighborhood. And so we've tried to make ourselves a student. What do those work and what don't?
Yeah, that's well said, Don, and I concur with everything you've said. And as a developer who's done large neighborhoods on tens of big acreages in the suburbs, doing one in the urban core on 2 acres in the case of the Ember, the level of effort and the level of detail, I'm just going to rough guess here, is probably 10 times as much effort to do it. And people ask me, well, why would you do it then? And I was asked this in a podcast last week, and because in some ways, doing stuff in the suburbs when you don't have to really think about it and where inches and feet don't matter, and whether you put a sidewalk here, you put it 20 feet over there, nobody really cares. But I always want to do developments with 2 things. One is I want to be able to look back in 30 years after it's all built and done and really be proud of what we built. And so for my son and my daughter, they can experience that, or my friends' kids. I want something that lasts. And too many neighborhoods just don't do that. The best they ever looked was the day they're built, and they just fade over time just because they weren't really well planned. And the second thing I always try to do, which is counterintuitive to a lot of my development friends who say never live in your own development, I found that obviously if I do multiple developments, I can't live in them all, but I can own property in my development. And so I've always committed to, if I build something, to own one of the assets in there. In the case of the Amber, I'm going to own one of those houses, right? For a family member, or it could be for a guest or something like that. And what that does for a buyer to know and understand is, as a developer, you make literally thousands of small decisions over the course of developing a community. It could be the width of the sidewalk, the quality of the materials, the depth of the sidewalk, the height of the railing, just any number of things. And if you know that you're going to live there or own property in that development, you just act differently. Okay. You care about it at a deeper level than most developers, which simply means they develop a piece of property, they sell it off. And I know guys that have actually developed land and never been to the property, believe it or not, which is crazy to me. Right. So I try to actually put boots on the ground every day. In this case, at the Ember, and I go over there, I look at it, and there's always something that I can learn and improve throughout the development process.
I just speaking at that same point from my side of the table, it's so apparent to us when our client is really invested in and has a mission of their own. And I would say that, most developers, just like probably most people in any profession, are really just building the last thing that made somebody money, and they don't have an emotional or a kind of philosophical mission around it. When they do, all sorts of things get unlocked. And I know I've said this before, but I think one of the problems you're going to have to deal with at the Ember is that people are going to want to come see it. I really believe it's going to be that special, because I believe that you're going to follow through. And you were mentioning about the millions of decisions you have to make. It's very easy in the course of it to say any one of those decisions is not that important. And I think part of our job is to rank those decisions and say to you, when the budget hits, which it invariably will, okay, this and this I think we could change, but this you have to stick with. And not many developers can see that a seemingly minor decision can be the beginning of the end for a project like this. And our disappointment is that most of our projects get compromised to a point where we think they've gone too far. And so I just think we were talking about mission earlier, and then you were talking about the vision for the neighborhood. I see that as the mission for the neighborhood, and it has to be sacred through the whole thing.
It does. We oftentimes around here say the small things are the big things. And you're right, Don. Too many developers, and I've seen it firsthand, they make those compromises slowly and then more over time. And I call it the drift to mediocrity, right? Their development started at this level, and over time it just became forgetful, truthfully. And so the Ember is not going to be that. I'm super excited about the project. So let's jump into it right now. Well, whenever we began the Ember, there's a lot of planning involved, months, if not years. And you always begin with multiple options as far as your site plan and layout. And so we want to review the ones that we looked at and we carefully considered, and why we skipped on them, and why we ended up with the site plan that we did, which we're absolutely thrilled about. So with that, Don, I'm going to let you walk us through the alternative site plans for the Ember.
Okay, so the first slide here just shows the site itself, and just for the sake of everybody, one of the things that proved important is the fact that there's kind of a slope that leads down to that big swath of trees on the right, and that was a design feature that we had to kind of incorporate to our advantage. So on the site, you've got 8th Avenue to the north, 9th to the south, Littler to the left, and Broadway to the right.
And those trees they serve two functions. One is it's a buffer, right, between both visually and for any noise between the neighborhood, the Ember, and Boulevard. But I was down there on the site the other day, Don, and it's going to be hard to believe, but I was walking around and I saw deer tracks, or maybe they were reindeer tracks since it's Christmas time. But there were deer tracks on the site.
When we saw this site, we thought, this is, on the one hand, it's difficult because it's got 4 distinct sides that you have to respond to. But on the other hand, it's the perfect site for somebody to live downtown, but have a sense of being not living above a shop or being right in the action. And that drainage plane with the buffer of trees is lovely. I mean, you'll know that there's a major road over there, but it filters it all and makes it so much nicer. So we thought this was a really great opportunity as a site.
Absolutely. And none of the houses actually face Boulevard or face the road. We actually turned them either west or in toward the internal courtyard. So Don, I'll let you continue on with the alternative sites.
Yeah, sure.
You'll see the term 8th Street Commons on the screen there, but that was just a name that we used early on before we decided upon the Ember.
Okay, so this first diagram, we were looking for a way to organize the site that would allow the number of units we thought we needed, but to create some sense of place. What we did is we had the major gray road going through the middle is parking access to the rear of units. Then the units actually face to the west onto Littler and to the east onto that grove of trees. But what we were trying to do was create value for the homeowners in a sense of a very small, compact, and cottage scale community. And I would say that what we failed at here, and you can just sort of see it, is that there's not one center, but there's two. There are those round courtyards. And our feeling was that somebody living here might feel like I'm part of the one side of this community, but not the other, or I'd rather be on Littler, but I'm on the green space, and then the yellow units are kind of left out by 8th and 9th. So after we drew this, we sort of critiqued it and said this was not going to create the best feeling for the residents there.
Yeah, it wasn't people first, as we always like to say. It kind of
it was a way to organize the site, but it wasn't creating that magic sense of arrival at any one place.
Exactly.
So these next two schemes on the top here were kind of versions of that, where we took the two green spaces, the round cottage courts, and we moved them inside and then put more units facing Littler and tried to organize them around a linear kind of courtyard or green that faces Littler. And you can see that green wedge to the left. To be honest, the critique was that this still didn't do it. It did create, you can see a walkway down the center, which we hoped everybody at some point would use, but there really wasn't enough there to say that when I step out the door as the yellow unit on the upper left, that I'm going to feel like I'm in a community with the person on the lower right. It was all a sense of the community we were trying to create, and we were making sub-communities or little neighborhoods within the neighborhood, but it didn't feel like it was going to deliver the magic to the homeowner that we really wanted it to do. We tried a version of that on the right where we consolidated the two little round cottage courts into one, but again, just not working. And then the diagram on the bottom was another version that tried to consolidate them, but that we decided against because it just didn't create enough of the units, and it also didn't address the streets very well and create an address. Because that's another thing I should say. I think one of the important things to a homeowner or someone who buys into this village is that you do have an address, and everybody can drive by and you can send your FedEx guy to it or the mailman to it, but it's an address. It's a central entrance that you all share in common. And I think all of these schemes had too many places where people didn't feel connected to each other.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so let's talk about the big reveal.
So the big reveal is sort of a version of the final plan that we did, which I think answers all those objections. And now the address is clearly on Littler, and there are access points on 8th and 9th. But what it organizes the whole project around is a connected linear courtyard. At some point, it's wide enough to gather in, and that's where the center of the community would be. At other points, it's a place that you move through or along, like the vertical walkway that goes through these, I wouldn't even call them courts, I would call them little moments along a path. But as you just look at it, you have a sense that everybody's participating in the same community. It's not a series of kind of geometric puzzle that you solve to get a number of, it's a place that's trying to create a sense where I walk through the gate, I know I'm in a special place, and I know that everybody knows each other. And that's really what we were trying to do here. And then I think that the other thing this did well was create, by moving the main circulation and the access down to the lower part by the tree bosque, we were able to turn everybody inwards and then create a water's edge or an edge to that green space that was really something that the whole neighborhood could enjoy.
Absolutely. And then the final version of this one, which was really close, we actually found 5 more units, what we call our carriage houses, that fit on this, both in the northwest and the southwest side, and then 3 along the alley as well. And so this is another.
This is a little three-dimensional sketch that we did early on, which helps just by the scale of the rooftops. You can get a feel of what the scale would be. But what you were talking about, Matthew, would be the little sketch of the building in the bottommost corner of the plan, which sets up kind of like a carriage house or a building that you would expect to be behind the houses, but in this case is actually also fronting on the street.
Yes. This is
Yeah, maybe scroll down one more. This is an image of the rear part of what we're calling the tuck under homes, and also showing the stair that is sort of a grand stair that takes you up between them and back into the common space. So there's a lot to do. What you don't see so much, except in the 3D drawings, is the sense of the up and down and the way the site falls from one side to another and down to the water, and using all of that to create little special magical moments like these, what I call the sort of Spanish steps here.
Yeah, I love these. Well, we can take a look at this video now. All right, now we have the opportunity to look at the 3-dimensional video, which actually Union helped produce this for us, which I think is really helpful. And too many times developers wait until the very end to do this. And I'm encouraging all of my partners to do this early in the process, because you can begin to see spaces and places that you were unable to see on a 2-dimensional piece of paper. And so these are very helpful for us to even make final tweaks to the project. So with that, I'm going to let Don walk us through the video.
Yeah, no, what you said about having a video like this is so important, because as I've said, a place like this exists in 3 dimensions. If you don't design it that way, it doesn't work. But here we're sort of flying in on the southwest corner of Littler and 9th Street. You can see how one of these carriage houses has turned its entrance to the street to suggest that this neighborhood has an address. It's not just an inward focused thing. Now we're kind of coming up onto the sidewalk, and we'll be moving along in front of the neighborhood, coming to what I call the address, and which is the main entrance into the green space. And you can see how these houses, even though they're facing into the courtyard, are also turning out to the street. And I think that's important, that these 2 units are helping make an address for everybody who lives inside. People will know when they come to visit you, this is where they come. They park their car outside and they're walking down the walkway, and they're seeing their neighbors, or they're sitting on the porches or playing in the green space, which has been sized to be big enough for kids to mess around in. You can see all the community aspects, like the chairs and the benches and the fire pit. We're moving past the fireplace now and through between 2 units that we call tuck unders and down what I call the Spanish steps. And that arrives you to kind of the biggest community moment in the plan, which is this sort of plunge pool and patio and what we're calling the moon gate, where the sense of craft and brick really restates the theme. We're looking back up the Spanish steps. You're seeing your neighbors coming down with their dog, and we've made provisions for dogs to be in the neighborhood. You get to the top of the steps, and now you're turning right onto one of these more linear courtyards. But again, that's another chance for one neighbor to know the other, just in the comings and goings, and the fact that the porches face each other and they're little door gardens and things. But the fence helps you feel like you know what part of that yard is yours and what isn't. So all of this, I hope you can see, just looking at that it's all adding up together or working together to create the chance for real connection and community. I think that's what that's what we're striving for in every one of those decisions.
Well, Don, you've done an amazing job with the Ember. I'm grateful to be in this development with you. As you know, we are in process of moving dirt on the site right now and going vertical in the spring of 2024. It's really going to be my best development I've ever done up to this point in time, but I think that's the way it should always be. I think your next development should be better and precede the ones you've done before. I just think that's a natural evolution of a developer. At least it should be. Instead of just repeating the same thing over and over and over again, I always like to try to improve it. And so hopefully my next one will be better than the Ember as well. But Don, you guys and your team have done an amazing job. We couldn't have done this without you. So thank you so much.
Well, the feeling is entirely mutual. I think to anybody who's going to experience this neighborhood, I think it's really going to be an incredible experience for them. I'm so excited to see it come out of the ground.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Matthew.